Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Flow podcast by Highland Yoga, hosted by founder Elsie Brotherton and co hosts Reedy Dukes and Annalie Burke. Highland Yoga is an Atlanta based hot yoga studio founded in 2015 in the quaint neighborhood of Virginia Highlands. And it's hard to wrap our minds around just how much we've grown and evolved since then. We already know our community is hooked on whatever magic is within our walls, and we want to offer you more outside of that. We can't wait to dive deep into all things yoga and wellness, but more importantly, what makes our world go round: our teachers, our devoted students, our community offerings, and more. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Find Your Flow podcast this week. I'm your host, Reedy Dukes, and I'm really excited to sit down and chat today with Dan Goerke. He is one of our students at our Sandy Springs location, and his journey and his cause and experience, I think, is definitely worth diving into because I think it's really relatable. It even is for me. So let's get right into it. Dan, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Reedy.
Yeah, so I like to open pretty much with all of our guests about hearing. We're obviously going to touch on a lot of topics, but I would like to hear first how you found yoga as a practice and what brought you to Highland Yoga.
So I discovered yoga in, I believe it was about the year 2000. And it was something that my wife, Denise, decided she wanted to do. And I guess I was bored and just wanted to hang out with her some more. And I said, I invited myself along to the class she was going to, and immediately fell in love with it. I just thought it was a great practice. I've always been athletic and a competitor in my entire life, mostly through competitive swimming. And I was kind of tired of that and wanted to try something different. And I thought, well, okay, yoga would be good for stretching. I thought, well, maybe a little muscle work. Boy, did I underestimate that. And then also it was a practice and a thing I could just keep doing until I'm 80, 90, 100 years old, right? And so let me try it. And fast forward through that beginning, she dropped off after a couple of years, and I just kept going to yoga. I absolutely loved it for the main reasons. Again, it was the stretching, a lot more athletic than I ever thought it would be, but also just the calming aspect. It helped me become more present in not only my practice but my everyday life. So I kept doing it for a while. We moved, and I fell out of it for probably 5 or 6 years, then got back into it about 2017, 16 or 17. And then COVID hit, and my studio at the time offered YouTube type, lessons and flows. And I tried it, and it just did not resonate. And so I dropped off again. And fast forward to 2023, I thought, you know what? It's time. I miss yoga. I miss the community. I miss the teachers. But I knew I didn't want to go back to the studio I was going to, and wanted to find something new. So I simply did a Google Maps search of the studios in my area. And I hadn't noticed, but Highland Yoga had opened in the Kroger shopping center that I shop at. And I'm like, huh, what are they about? And did a website search and looked at you guys' website and go like, I love the hot room. Okay, that's appealing to me. And said, if I join here, it's 2 miles from my house. There's no excuse for me not to go. The commute is so easy. And bought a 30-day trial, and I've been hooked ever since. Absolutely love it.
Well, we've been so happy to have you as such a big part of our community. I think I heard a little bit about the organization that you support maybe last year or even earlier than that. We did a little fundraiser. But I just want to share. So, what we want to talk about today is broadly how to take care of yourself being in a caregiver role. So, do you want to share how that relates to you and your story?
Absolutely. So in 2012, when Denise was just 56, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And that was a shock to us, but yet it explained a lot of what was going on. Her forgetfulness, her confusion, the fact that she was just about to get fired from her job because she couldn't do the things she was supposed to be doing. And again, in hindsight, it was because of the Alzheimer's. So I jumped into this role that I had never planned for, never thought I would be a caregiver, and especially for a disease like Alzheimer's disease. And I knew um, I couldn't do it by myself, and that I've always believed in being the best person I can be, the best athlete I can be, the best at my yoga practice that I could be, whatever it was, I wanted to be the best. And having not known, I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's. I knew, well, take that back. I couldn't spell it, but I did know two things: that it caused people to lose their memories, and that people who had the disease would eventually pass away because of the disease. And that was it. That's all I knew. So I quickly went online again and discovered the Alzheimer's Association, and dove into their website, the research they were doing, information, and I began to realize what an unbelievable toll the disease is on the caregiver. And they threw out statistics about how often the caregiver passes away before the person with the disease because of the stress
Oh,
of
wow.
being a caregiver. Yeah, amazing. And I thought, what is going on here? I need to learn more. So I called up the Alzheimer's Association, uh, sat down within weeks of having that diagnosis, came up with a care plan. They were wonderful. I used their 24/7 hotline one time at 4 in the morning when I was having an issue with her behavior. They talked me off the cliff. And so it's just been a wonderful organization, and it's been therapeutic for me because I went to support groups. I think that that is a huge part of being a caregiver is getting in that community, talking to other people who are going through the journey you're going through. And it doesn't have to be with Alzheimer's, right? It can be any disease or issue that you're dealing with. Is get out there with others in support groups. And the support group is a wonderful vehicle, I'll call it that, for learning more about the disease. You get to bounce ideas off of your fellow caregivers. You get to hear what they're going through, and your situation sometimes doesn't feel as bad as theirs. And it was a great mechanism. I still, to this day, this is I met my caregiving group in 2013. To this day, we still have a dinner once a month where we get together, fast forward 12 years later, and sit and talk. And so it's caregiving has been a great resource. And as I mentioned, the Alzheimer's Association has been great. And you guys were great in adopting the fundraiser I wanted to do with Highland Yoga, with a class, and folks being able to make donations to the Alzheimer's Association. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So you started seeking these support groups pretty early on in your wife's uh, disease progression.
Absolutely. I was in, so again, we got diagnosed in October of 2012. February of 2013, I was in a formal class and a formal support group, and I kind of became a support group junkie. I had probably had two or three going at one time, and then they would offer them online, and it's just, again, it's just an incredible resource for the caregiver to be able to talk to other people going through this journey.
So how else were you coping really early on? And what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I still would I again through all the research and talking to folks about the disease, everyone kept saying this is a disease about the caregiver. And when I first heard that, Reedy, I thought, oh no, 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 they're wrong. No, this is a disease about Denise and her journey and what she's going through. Within about 6 months after hearing that, I thought, you know what? This is a disease about the caregiver. And because of the stress and strain that is placed on the caregiver, again, particularly for someone with Alzheimer's, you have to start doing everything for them. They lose their ability to reason, to drive cars, schedule things. So you become their scheduler, their doctor, their pharmacist, paying the bills. So there's all these responsibilities on your shoulder. So what I was told was, therefore, to be, again, the best caregiver you could be, you've got to take care of yourself. And I did that in a variety of ways. I really started maintaining a solid meditation practice, again, to get myself to a calm and present place. I kept going to a gym, local gym, to work out, and then I went to the yoga studio too, which again was a great practice to begin. And to this day, I tell caregivers, do something like that. You don't have to do all three. You don't do all three at once, but do something for yourself every single day, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. Get that regimen in and practice in of carving off that time for yourself so that you can be physically and mentally healthy for your loved one.
And I feel like that definitely sets you apart from some of the people I know who have come into a caregiver role, sometimes unexpectedly, but I feel like often the story is that they're pouring everything into the other person and forgetting about their own needs completely. And I think that's kind of the norm, or is that how you feel is the norm?
Oh, it absolutely happens more often than it doesn't.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say also it tends to be what I've seen is it's a generational thing. We we have the parents or maybe grandparents, if that's the situation, that grew up in the 40s and 50s, and well, we I got to fend for myself. This is all on me. I'm gonna be, I'm the devoted husband or wife. I said to death do us part, no matter what. And they ignore their own needs, and that is just not healthy. And again, you just see the spouse caregiver is the one that gets worse, much worse, much faster, and that's just not healthy. But yeah, I would say more often than not that's the situation, regardless of the generation and I think too, I see it a lot in the Alzheimer's world where the new caregiver to this disease says, "Oh, hey, yeah, I got this. It's a disease, but I can do it." And what they're used to seeing and hearing is, well, okay, the cancer caregiver, the other disease caregiver doing it and doing it successfully, and kudos to them. But this disease is like no other. And it's just super tough on the caregiver. So yeah, yeah, I keep telling people, take care of yourself, do something for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And how would you describe? I think when most people think about terminal illnesses, they think about physical health declining and maybe mobility declining. But how do you think it's harder? How do you think it differs when it's from my understanding until late stages is mostly mental?
Hmm. Yeah, it's hugely emotional too, because what happens is, and again, I didn't know this going into it. The person's personality goes away, and for regardless of your situation, whether it was my spouse or a father, mother, situation or grandparent even, it is so sad to see that person's personality go away. Denise was the type, she was in sales, she was bubbly, bright. I always said to people, they say, what was she like? And I said, well, it was when she walked in the room, the party started, right?
Mm.
She was just that type of person. And it was so sad to see her go quiet, and not say anything. And then this was a different dynamic too, in that I would propose doing something, going out or whatever, and she would all of a sudden, being her personality, she would run with it and she'd say, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, I'm along for the ride all of a sudden. And I still remember how shocked I was the first time I said, hey, why don't we go do this and this? And she goes, okay. And I'm like, what? You said okay? There was no discussion about it. And she became this very docile, compliant person. And I just like, wow, that's so strange and so sad, honestly. Versus, and again, every disease is bad. Don't get me wrong. Every disease is horrible. Yet I remember my mom having she passed away from melanoma cancer, right? I had 2 days before she passed away, I had a totally coherent conversation with her that I still cherish to this day. Two
Mhm.
days. Yet it was 5 or 6 years between the time I had the coherent conversation with Denise and she passed away. And that is just this ugly dynamic of the disease is that person, and you see it slowly go away week after week, month after month. We say in the community that you really see them pass away twice. Once their personality as you're caring for them, and then second, the physical passing away. And you have to go through that twice, and you go through the grieving process as well twice.
Yeah, and not to mention how early this started happening with her. Can you explain to us the difference between early onset and whatever the other the
That's
other
a good question. I
situation
don't
is?
know. I don't know what the other one's called.
I don't either.
Regular. I never thought about that. Yeah.
But
So,
early onset usually starts at around what age?
so scientifically, it's defined as age 65 or younger.
Okay.
And right now, about 5% of all Alzheimer's cases are younger onset. So 65 or younger. So not a lot in the field. There are about 7 million right now in the United States that have the disease. So a relatively small number. And that's why, it's particularly devastating to the younger folks like Denise that have it, because you often find that these are folks that have a healthy lifestyle like she did, um, healthy relationships, bright, intelligent. They're still working, and so often because of the disease, they get fired from their work. And
Mhm.
and they're left without benefits, and that is so sad to see. I was fortunate in that we caught it barely enough time to get her on her disability program at work. And that was a lifesaver. But again, I also had folks in my support group where that did not happen, where they got fired from their work. And then the other kind of gotcha with that, with the younger people, is the spouse about the same age. The caregiving becomes such a burden that they have to quit work, right?
Mhm.
Which is a financial strain on that situation. And it was a financial strain on me, no doubt. I still worked. I wanted to keep my work up. I found that was a respite for me to
Mhm.
get away from the disease and go sit in meetings and have that stress. It was a weird dynamic, but it was a respite to go to work. And then I eventually ended up having to hire a companion care person that came into the house and just hung out with Denise, took her out shopping and did a lot of, hikes and things like that. But that's a weird circumstance again for someone that has the disease at a younger age.
What was it like for you emotionally to make the decision to bring somebody else in to support you as a caregiver?
Wow. You know, that's an interesting question. Thinking back to that, it really wasn't. I would almost say there's no emotion behind it. It was just a necessity.
Mhm.
I was concerned about her, turning on the oven or the burner and the house burns down, and I just didn't feel safe um, with leaving her in the house all by herself at the point that she was in the disease. And I thought I've just got to do this for the safety, her safety primarily. But also I think I also have had this sense that, I didn't I wanted to have her life as normal as possible, right? Which meant a lot of social interaction. And she just wasn't getting that when I went to work. So I thought it would be important to bring someone in to socialize with her as well. And the one woman I found, Rita, she was fantastic. She would take, Denise out and do shopping, hiking, as I mentioned. She even got to the point where she and Denise became real good friends. Rita would take her over to her house. They would attend Rita's son's athletic events, whatever they were, and I just felt so relieved to know that Denise had that resource and that I had that resource too, and that was so important. So in hindsight, again, that's and again, it was such a relief to me as a caregiver to know that she was in a safe place and being well attended to.
Yeah. So how did everything develop over the years? So around what year did you bring in a caregiver?
Yeah, so that was in 2015, early 2015, so roughly 2.5 years after the diagnosis.
Mhm.
And that lasted the having the caregiver, the companion caregiver, lasted about a year and a half, give or take, and then had to make the painful decision to put her in memory care.
Mhm.
And again, going back to the caregiver taking care of him or herself, I was fortunate that Denise has 6 siblings. All of them would come. Not all of them, excuse me. They would take turns, but each one of them would come once a month and give me a weekend off, right? And
Mhm.
so that was fantastic as well. And one of her older sister was here one weekend helping me take care of her. And we looked at each other and realized, God, this is crazy. We're having to escort Denise, one on either side of us, escort her down the hallway, excuse me, and into the bathroom and help her go to the bathroom, right? And we're like, this is crazy, 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 crazy. So much stress on us. And that's when I realized I needed to have her in a place where professionals
Yeah.
were taking care of her, right? And I knew I was breaking a promise that I had made the very first day we got the diagnosis. She and I talked after the diagnosis of things we wanted to do, not want to do, and she looked at me and she said, "Do not put me in one of those places." And of course, I immediately knee-jerk react and said, "No, of course I won't." Knowing in the back of my mind that that's probably where we're going to have to go one day.
Mhm.
I learned later that is what is called in the caregiving world a therapeutic lie, right?
Right.
And you use those quite frequently to your benefit and to calm the person down. So anyway, it was June of 2016 where I found a memory care community for her and had to place her in. And that was, like I said, that was just extremely difficult, emotionally more than anything. Yeah, you can
Mhm.
handle the paperwork, you can handle moving furniture in and hanging pictures and all that, but just the emotional part of it was just really, really tough.
Yeah, and it's happening so fast, it sounds like. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like you don't have that much time to process if you're dealing with logistics and the financial stress and everything else.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember coming home that the night we put her in the community and just I was alone here at the house and just let it all the emotions flowed. And it's like, oh, didn't expect that, but man, I didn't want to stop it either.
Yeah. So, how did Alzheimer's organization continue to support you over the years?
Yeah, I continued to keep up with the literature about
Uh,
caregiving. That was an important role, and I I don't think they know it, but they I I use them in a therapeutic role of volunteering and giving back. So as I mentioned, when I researched the disease, I realized how devastating it was and how terrible it was. And one of my first thoughts was, we got to get rid of this disease. It's horrible. And so I've done a variety of volunteer work with the Alzheimer's Association, including advocacy, which is a fancy name for lobbying, right? We go to Congress every year. I'm going down to my congresswoman's office next week, and we lobby for more research money at the federal level. We lobby for legislation that can benefit caregivers of those with the disease. And I've been doing that for a dozen years. I do fundraising, as you know, through my Walk to End Alzheimer's team. They asked me to serve on the board of directors here in the Georgia chapter, and I did that and became chairman, which role I'm still in for the next 2 or 3 months. But you know, I love serving on the board and helping out in any way I can with the global mindset of trying to get rid of this disease.
mhm.
So
And
it
I said
doing
organization, I meant association
yeah,
earlier.
yeah, no, no, that's okay. That's fine. Yeah, yeah. No, so the volunteering has been very therapeutic for me, and like I said, it's just all part of you know, now, you know, again, trying to help other caregivers and also honoring Denise at the same time.
So, while you were caregiving, were you thinking in the back of your mind that you want to create material for caregivers going through the same situation? Like, were you noting certain things? Because that's something I've done before. And that I feel like is one way of coping, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, journaling, you know, is a big
Hmm.
part of your caregiving journey. And I remember writing things down in my phone that would come up, situations. And so yeah, I think that whole part and part of the volunteering I would do would be to help run support groups for other caregivers and just to get out there and talk to communities about what the disease is about, truly. It's not just about losing your memories. And to my whole goal here is also to support caregivers in this journey. You know, and I remember being in support groups and we would tell what's going on. And I would tell my stories, whether it's support groups or other groups, and people would tell me, you need to write a book about this. And I'm like, nah, I'm not an author. No, Dan, you need to write a book. Um, and, you know, I'd tell story after story. And fast forward, after Denise passed away, she passed away in 2021. I finally had the space mentally, physically, and in every other way that I said, I'm going to write this book, you know, mostly because caregivers need to know what they're getting into. And so I wanted to be that resource and provide tips to caregivers about what they can do, cannot, shouldn't do, kind of, sort of. So I ended up in publishing the book, self-published last summer, and it's out there, Unforgettable, Unbelievable, and it's on Amazon. Thank you for letting me plug it. But it's just, it's out there as a resource for other caregivers.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth the plug. And I'm curious, how is the book structured? Is how did you go about structuring it?
Yeah, interesting question. I wanted to tell those stories, right? That people found interesting. Um, and so I talk about our journey, Denise and I going through this. The very first chapter, I kind of toyed with what chapter to put first. And one of my editors said, think about the diagnosis. And I'm like, okay, I can see that being the very first chapter. And you open the book and it's like what happened with us. The disease hit us smacked in the face, right?
Hmm.
Well, that's the way the book opens. It smacks you in the face, so to speak, with here's what happened during the diagnosis and how difficult it was. It was a year and a half, almost 2 year process to get the final diagnosis.
Hmm.
So at the same time, I was writing the book, I knew that this is a heavy, heavy subject and very emotional. But yet there were so many lighthearted moments in our journey that I interspersed those with the heavy moments. So
Hmm.
there's a chapter on the diagnosis. The next one is a chapter, I can't remember the exact order, but the next one is talking a chapter about embarrassing and the funny stories that would happen. And so I wanted to keep it serious, and it is a serious, but also tell about the lighthearted moments that happen while you're a caregiver that I encourage laugh at it, because it is funny. It's sad that it happened because of the Alzheimer's, but yet these things that happened that she did were hilarious.
Hmm.
So it's structured that way. And then about 3 years into the journey, um, I I'll just come out and say it. I started um, communicating with her telepathically, and it was during a very stressful time in the caregiving role where I was having trouble getting her to toilet, getting her in the car, so many challenges. And she started talking to me in my intuition, my mind's eye, and I asked her to help me understand how to better take care of her, how to get her in the car better. So there wasn't this huge battle. And she did this. She showed me pictures in my mind's eye of what to do. And I'd try it out the next day. And it was like, wow, this is easy doing what she wants. And it made her less stressed and it made me less stressed. So that's about the second half of the book is telling those stories of how I used that communication that she was giving me to better take care of her. And then subsequently, how other people with Alzheimer's were communicating with me, that were in her memory care facility, the residents started communicating with me and telling me their wants and needs. There was one resident in her place because I became friends with the memory care director, and I told her about it, my communication, and I said, "Hey, if there's anybody you want me to talk to in here," and she goes, "Well, Billy." I said, "What's going on with Billy?" She goes, "He's really agitated." I'm like, "Okay, well, let me check in." I started communicating with Billy. He immediately says, "I, I want somebody to read the Bible to me." I'm like, "Okay." Any chapters and verses, and he told me specific chapters and verses. So I go back the next day, tell the memory care director, and she goes, "Oh, yeah, he has this Bible on his desk. We'll start doing that." I said, "Great." I walk out to say goodbye to Denise, bend over, give her a kiss. I stand up. Billy is standing next to me with his Bible open.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't need proof of this communication, but there it was. And I looked at Billy and I said, "Billy, I'm so sorry. I've got to go to a meeting," right? Literally, I had to go to a meeting. And I went and got one of the other caregivers and I said, "Can you read to him?" So it's those kind of things that I now offer to other caregivers, right? let me communicate. Let me help you understand what your loved one wants, desires, needs in the way of caregiving.
So is what you're describing, is this a communication where you're in the presence of someone else with the disease and without them saying it to you verbally, you're able to pick up on what they're essentially asking for but aren't able to say?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. As I mentioned, so many of the people with the disease go silent. They lose their ability to talk, like Denise did. She had lost her ability to verbalize. And so I can, again, it's such a great ability that I can do it with someone sitting in the room, but I can also do it, if you tell me, hey, my grandmother, can you communicate with my grandmother? I'm like, sure. And I will and write things down and you can ask me questions. And I'll communicate that question to them. They'll give me an answer back and we just go from there. So they don't have to be in the room necessarily.
So is this something that happened with your wife just out of the blue one day?
Yes, is the easy
Really?
answer. Yes. Now, in hindsight, for decades, have been open to things like mediums,
Uh-huh.
reaching beyond the veil to talk to dead people, right? And all kinds of different aspects of spirituality.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was open to that kind of thing. I didn't know I could do it. So the way it went was, again, it was a really difficult day with Denise, right? It would take, really, it was crazy. If you can imagine telling someone you need to go to the bathroom, you got to remind the person,
Mhm.
and it would take an hour sometimes for me to get her to go into the bathroom, to go to the bathroom, and sometimes 30, 40 minutes in the bathroom trying to get her to sit down. Crazy, right? So things like that were going on during the day. It had been a stressful day at work. Um, and I got home, made dinner. Fortunately, she went to bed early. I took her to bed, and I stayed up trying to chill, right? Had a few glasses of wine. Okay, probably a bottle of wine. And went to bed. And I remember sitting there next to her, and she's laying fast asleep. And I thought, again, in my mind, I didn't verbalize it out loud. I thought, you know, Denise, if you could only talk to me and tell me what you need, this would be a whole lot easier. I immediately heard in my mind's eye Denise's voice say, well, talk to me then. And I'm like, okay. I glanced down. She's fast asleep. I'm checking. Did you
Uh-huh.
say that out loud? No, it was all in my head. I heard her in my head. And I said, okay, okay. How do I get you on the commode easier? She would show me pictures. She would tell me, put your hands on my shoulders, move my hips this way, do this, do that. I'm like, okay. The next morning, we get up. I said, let's go to the bathroom. I get in there with her, do the things she had told me to do in less than 30 seconds. She's on the commode. And I am like I'm like the NFL football player who scored a touchdown. I'm doing a dance in the
I
bathroom.
bet you were.
And she looks at me and she goes, "Get out." and and I was just so elated and it just went on from there. It's like, okay, how do I get you in the car better? What do you want to eat? And all kinds of questions, and it just snowballed from there.
Gosh, I have the chills. So is this
Yes.
something, so when this happened, were you like, was that the wine or
Good question.
what
Well,
did you
that's
do
why
with this new, did you journal about it? Did you tell people about it?
I told a few close, like-minded friends.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I reached out and found somebody who could help teach me more about telepathic communication. And I did some training with her. Because again, I'm all about, I want to be the best I can. So I wanted to be the best telepathic communicator. And I just kept doing it, okay, how do I do this? And it kept proving itself over and over again and made my caregiving role so much easier. Didn't make it easy, but it
Mm.
made it easier. And I should say less difficult, probably is a better way to say it. So just, and like, just, I don't know how else to say it other than it just proved itself over and over again that and I never disbelieved what I was hearing because her voice in my head was so vividly clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then subsequently, uh, people who have gone silent have come to me and told me, again, Billy and his Bible kind of thing, um, what their wants and needs are too.
That's so interesting. And is this something that you researched later on and found out that other people have this that are able to tap into this as well? Is this a thing?
It's a thing. There aren't as many, there are very few people that do this with people who have dementia or Alzheimer's.
Uh-huh.
So I'm a rarity in that aspect of it. There are a lot of people that are discovering this ability with kids that are autistic
Mm.
that obviously can't communicate, and the parents are starting to hear communication from them, to either telepathically, or just through coincidences that happen in their lives. So there are other people out there that do this kind of work, but nothing as what I shouldn't say nothing, but few people that do this specifically with dementia patients. Yeah.
And do you think part of it is a product of like a close emotional bond with the person with the disease? Or do you think this would be like an ability for like say you and Billy, but do you think initially it comes from some sort of close relationship connection?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It,
Mm.
it, it initiated because of my love, our love, Denise and I, and absolutely started that way. And I honestly, that's all I thought it was going to be. It was going to be a caregiving tool, another tool that I had, a valuable tool that I had to help be her caregiver. And then it just, like I said, just it started expanding from there. That I am a person that is very open to things like this. So I kind of laugh at myself. I said, I guess I was advertising to people that had dementia
Mm-hmm.
that I can hear you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny because when I walk into a memory care community, there are people with dementia that come right up to me, and
Hmm.
people are the caregivers there are looking at like why did Sarah go up to this guy, and it's like I know Sarah wants to communicate, and Sarah knows
Mm-hmm.
I can communicate. And so they have got someone who is listening to them. And that I think is a big part of why other people with dementia are attracted to me because they know I can hear them and they
Mm-hmm.
are being listened to and they can talk to me. So that whereas they can't do that with anybody that walks in there or their caregiver that is in the community.
So I'm wondering, I mean, this is obviously a huge way that you've been able to find meaning in what has happened to you that's pretty tragic and just even hard to even hear, but it's people go through this all the time, all every day. And um how have you been able to fit what's happened to you into like your life narrative or why you're here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has completely changed that narrative. It has completely changed my work. Prior to this, and I still I'm in real estate. I have my broker's license as a real estate agent, and but I've pared that back to almost nothing, to the point where I'm doing readings. That's what they're called for loved ones. I also do companion care work. So much like the lady I hired, I'm going out and doing that. I have a soft spot in my heart for caregivers. I want to give them a break. So I sit with their loved ones for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and things like that. And then I'm also doing what's called senior placements. So if you're at a point where your mom and dad need to go into an assisted living or an independent living situation, I go out and help them find that living solution. And obviously for people that need to go into memory care as well too. So I have just like left the past behind and gravitated toward this world of dementia, Alzheimer's, communication, and senior being with seniors, which again, something I never thought I would do in a million years.
And I have to say, this is just kind of the opposite of what I would think you would want to do once you have your time and life back. Um, what do most people do when they're no longer caregiving
They
after
don't do
something like
this.
this? They don't do this.
They go down what you just said. They go down a completely different path. And my caregiving friends look at me and go like, you're either very compassionate or you're crazy, right? For doing this. But most of the time I mean, they're gentle. They say they admire what I do. Um, God, I was so impacted by the disease and what caregivers go through on this journey with Alzheimer's, that I just felt this tremendous need to give back and give some solace, and show some compassion to these caregivers that are going through this horrible disease, and a disease that no one asked for, no one deserves, no one does anything on purpose to get Alzheimer's. It just doesn't happen. And it's just I don't know how else to describe it, Reedy, other than I have a place in my heart for these folks, and I want to
Mhm.
do something to change their world for the better.
So, what advice would you have for someone who, for instance, did not choose to be a caregiver and their loved one has just received a pretty heavy diagnosis like this? It doesn't have to be with Alzheimer's, but just in general. And, what would you say to a caregiver who didn't choose to be a caregiver, who is extremely doubtful about how it's all going to go?
I think one of the most difficult things I see caregivers do is isolate themselves. They get the thought in their head, the mentality is, again, I got this, I can do this. And what I tell caregivers is no, no, you can't. Okay. Do not isolate yourself. Do not, the proverbial ostrich sticking their head in the sand. Don't do that. Get involved with a support group. Reach out to family members. Ask them for help. Ask them to come relieve you, and get some respite time to yourself. Again, I probably said it a million times. I'll say it to other people. Get involved in a support group. It was so valuable to me, and learn about how to be a caregiver, and ask family and friends for help. I think just get out there and ask for help. Don't be, you know, too shy to do that or too nervous to do that. People want to help. They really do. They really do. So, um, one of the things I will say too, if you know of somebody in the caregiving role, one of the, and you want to help, this is an interesting thought, but stay with me. One of the worst things you can ask that caregiver, what do you need? Or what can I do for you?
Mm-hmm.
And why that may sound strange is what happens is in the caregiving role, you have to make 5,000 decisions a day. And some of them much more emotional than others, right? You're making decisions all the time. And here you are, I come along and I want to help by asking, what do you need? That's just one more question. That's one more thing they have to think about. No, Don't ask that question. What I tell people, just do. Go do something for that caregiver. Don't ask them. Go make a casserole. Make a cake. Show up on their front door and say, "Hey, let's go out and get a coffee. Let's get you away from your caregiving role. Let's go to a movie." Show up on their door and say, "We are going to a movie." Right?
Mhm.
I read that and started practicing it, and it's amazing. So don't ask, just go do. It's what I
Yeah, and
tell
that's
other
another
people.
role, right? It's your caregiver as a role, and then it's supportive person in caregiver's life who doesn't know how to support caregiver. I think
Yeah,
that's a huge one too.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, and take care of yourself as a caregiver. Go do yoga.
So it's not selfish to do yoga as a caregiver.
Heck no, it's not. It's not totally selfish. And that's a good point. So many caregivers think of that. Hey, well, if I start going to yoga classes, or I start going to the gym, or I go out for walks, I'm selfish. I'm ignoring my loved one. And no, you're not. You're doing something to maintain your mental and physical health so that you can be a better caregiver.
Mhm.
So, yes, go sign up at Highland Yoga for a trial at least, and join a wonderful community.
Yeah. So we are so happy to support you as a student in our community. And I want to know how else we, as students and teachers at Highland Yoga, can support your cause, or just learn about resources that have been helpful for you.
Yeah, gosh, I would love to continue to partner with you guys for fundraising, and I can provide a link to my walk team where people can donate. That's real heartwarming. A donation class, so to speak, or I think last year we did a month-long
Mm-hmm.
donation opportunity, and so that's been a big support, and just being able to go in and talk to the incredible instructors at Sandy Springs about my journey, and hear their support and wanting to support and say, oh, I'll do a donation class or something like that. I think that's the best way to continue to support and, yeah, keep those classes going. I'm loving the sculpt right now.
Oh, are you good?
Yeah,
We were
yeah.
just talking about that in a meeting, trying to
Okay.
gauge the trends. So glad to hear that.
Yeah, I would give you guys a 6 stars out of 5 for that one.
Thank you so much. Okay, so remind us what your book is called, and do you have any other book or podcast recommendations on this broader topic of self-care as a caregiver?
Yeah, my book is called Unforgettable, Unbelievable, and it's available on Amazon. Or if you're in the Atlanta area, I could come and meet you and sell you a book, and we can have a coffee and talk. Either way. And other podcasts, I mentioned I am also going to be on a podcast in a couple weeks, the Telepathy tapes, talking about telepathic communication. If you're a caregiver, especially of Alzheimer's disease, go check out the Alzheimer's Association website, alz.org, and make yourself available to all those resources, all the information. Call the 800 number, 1-800-272-3900, and talk to a trained social worker about the disease or any questions you may have. So that's again, don't isolate if you're a caregiver. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge take home point. Well, do you have any questions for me before we wrap things up?
Not right now.
Okay.
Not right now. It's Friday afternoon. It's getting really close.
Wow, I almost forgot it was Friday.
I know, right? I know.
We're
God.
busy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I think this is going to be really valuable for our community to listen to, hopefully here shortly. So And send me that podcast you're going to be on. I want to listen to it. I think it's such an interesting topic that I will probably go research now.
Cool. Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being willing and open to talking about this subject too. And like as we know, it all revolves around the caregiver taking care of him or herself, and yoga is such a huge resource for that. One thing I forgot to mention too, when my wife was in memory care, the memory care community had someone come in and do chair yoga with them.
Hmm.
And I looked at that and I'm going like, that's not for me, right? But I really see the value in that. It's really cool because it's the mind body connection that they're trying to stimulate, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that's really cool. I love chair yoga now.
That's so awesome.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll send a teacher over there. But
there you go.
yeah. Okay. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope to see you around the studio soon. Thanks everyone for tuning in this week. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Your support really does matter. This podcast is produced by Highland Yoga with music by our very own teaching team member, Lauren C. If you want to learn more about Highland Yoga, visit our website at highland-yoga.com or email us to sign up for our weekly newsletter at info@highland-yoga.com. See you next week for more of Find Your Flow.